Good afternoon, everyone. You're reaching the end of a long and I hope very fruitful and beneficial day to you. I know that you've covered the subject of pro bono translating has been mentioned by one or two of the speakers already, but I've got some thoughts about it in slightly more depth that might give you some ideas of ways to gain your self-experience and break through this barrier that we've been mentioning. No work, no experience, then how do you get work if you have no experience, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm sure you know the term pro bono is the Latin term short for pro bono publico. So you're doing something for the public good. It's used quite widely in the legal profession, and it's a long-established tradition in the legal profession where lawyers will work for low fee or no fee in various ways in which to provide people with legal advice without charging. And you get that in subsidised or voluntary services, such as you'll get high street solicitors and so on who will offer free legal advice for sort of a short period, 15 minutes or half an hour, to clients of Citizens Advice Bureau, for instance. And this is done as a way of providing a public service and helping people out. As linguists, most of us have probably done it already. I'm sure if you all have some fluency in more than one language, you might well have been asked already to help people out with a language issue. In the UK, still, for English native speakers, being more multilingual or bilingual, at any rate, having a facility in more than one language is still fairly unusual and considered to be something of a magic art. You know, if you say you're a linguist, you're a translator, interpreter, and they say, "Oh, how many languages do you speak?" And they get all excited about it because it's quite unusual still among native English speakers to have a facility in another language. And so you might have already done things like helping someone make a holiday booking, or setting up a trip abroad, that kind of thing, or even property purchases, and somebody's buying property abroad. They say, "Oh, we've had this letter from the solicitors, what does it say?" Or even helping nieces and nephews with homework, things like that. So you might already have done some using your languages for, just to help somebody out already. But there are two main reasons why, as professional linguists, we might decide to go down this route to try and find ourselves some pro bono work. We're providing, this is slightly different, we're providing our work professionally, at a professional level, but free of charge. And first, of course, there's the feel-good factor, the same kind of thing as the lawyers. You're putting something back. We're all very fortunate, we get a good education, we're perhaps, comfortably placed, and we want to give something back to society and help people in need, whatever it might be. So that's one thing. And it makes you feel good. It's a sense of rightness, it's a sense of justice, helping people in distress in one way or another, whatever it might be. But then from a practical point of view, for ourselves, it's what we get back from that in a practical sense that is perhaps most useful to you when you're starting out in your careers as professional linguists. And this can be advantageous to you in a number of ways. First of all, we know that it's very important as professional linguists to work on our skills constantly, to keep ourselves sharp, to work to keep ourselves up to date. Is this me making that noise? Beg pardon. Try and stand back a bit. I'll keep back a bit. Yeah. Okay. Right. So particularly at the start of our careers, as we've said, this is a bootstrap situation. You're trying to haul yourself up by your bootstraps and not without any help, without any support. And so offering services on a voluntary basis to individuals or organisations can be of mutual benefit. We can gain experience of working for a reputable organisation, and we'll be doing this under conditions that are similar to those for a commercial user. In other words, we'll work to deadlines, we will do our research, and we will deliver a product that is well finished and usable for the customer specifications. So that's what you have to bear in mind. Whatever you're doing with your work, you must do it in this professional way. Secondly, even experienced translators and interpreters can use their pro bono work for their own personal and professional development. Perhaps they're working in new or unusual fields, or with a different kind of client or text. So it's a way of branching out. It's a way of acquiring new skills, new specialisations, but in an area where if you're giving your services for free, it has slightly less pressure than trying to offer a new service to somebody who's expecting to have to pay a good price for it. And you're doing this often as well if you're working for free and you're working, say, for a charity or something like that. You're doing it for users who are ready to be more understanding, perhaps to forgive minor errors, minor mistakes. And they can be understanding if you're asking for more help in doing the job than if you were doing it for a paying customer who might just expect you to deliver it and not make a fuss about it, just get on with it. If you come back to your client and say, I'm sorry, this is a bit obscure, can you help me out here? Then they're more likely to be sympathetic. If it's being done out of your goodwill and generosity, the end user's more likely to accept a finished product that perhaps requires a bit of work their end before it's ready for use. But as I said before, it's vital for your sake to work for your pro bono clients with this very professional approach. You must be efficient and thorough in the service you provide. You should also only work in the specialist subject areas with which you are comfortable, even if they're not the top of your area, the most things you're most familiar with. Nonetheless, you should have some knowledge of the area and, of course, the language. Don't try and work in a language you don't really understand just because it's for free. If you are intending, by using the pro bono work, to develop a new period of expertise, then try to make this clear to your customer, to your client, so that they can make allowances and take the necessary precautions if they need to. And most importantly, keep records of work done pro bono in exactly the same way as you would if you were being paid for it. You have the name of your client, the number of words you're doing, the kind of subject area it covers, and these kind of things. The only thing you're missing out is the money column, how much you're getting per word or whatever. Because then you have this record, and you keep a record from the client, keep the purchase order, keep a letter asking you to do it, the covering letter, whatever it is. Keep those so you have a concrete record of what you've done, because all this will contribute to your own work record, even if it's not paid. It's still valid as long as you can demonstrate that this is what you've done. And working in this professional way means that the experience that you gain from working pro bono can then be used in the future in a number of ways. As I said, it helps you to keep a record for yourself of your own professional development. And the clients, even if they're not going to pay, it's well worth asking beforehand if, assuming they are satisfied with what you've done, they will give you a reference, because that is priceless. If you've been working for a charity or somebody for some time, or you've done a project for a charity, worked on translating a set of documents or a website or something like that for free, make sure you get the reference. The customer was satisfied with what I did. That's the most valuable thing you could get out of this, because then you've got something to take to the translation company or whoever you're hoping will actually give you a paid job and say, well, I've done this for whoever it was, and this is the reference, this is what they said, or contact this person, they will give me a good reference, because that's really worth the paper it's written on, really worthwhile. If they can give you a reference that you were professional, that you delivered on time, that you were satisfactory, that the work was done according to standard, then that's well worth having in future. Secondly, if you have this record of pro bono work and satisfactory references, then that is also useful yourself with organisations such as the Institute of Translation and Interpreting, because you can add that to your own record of work done for membership of your professional organisation. If you want to join the ITI, you have to demonstrate that you have done a certain number of words or a certain number of hours interpreting. And your pro bono work will be considered, will be treated as part of your professional experience as long as you can demonstrate it, as long as you have evidence that you've done it and done it satisfactorily. So it's well worth keeping all that right from the beginning, because you have that to show when you want to become a member of the ITI or whatever. It's also very useful for if you want to become a chartered linguist, because if you're later on in your career, or if you become a chartered linguist with the Institute of Linguists, the Chartered Institute of Linguists, then you will need to demonstrate both the work that you've done and also your continuing professional development. And throughout your career, pro bono work can be part of your CPD record. So it's all these reasons. It's vital to keep a paper record or an electronic record of this kind of work that you've done, even if you've not been paid. In my own career, I've worked pro bono and continue to do so all the time for all the reasons I've evidenced already. I've always found it useful. I've always found it rewarding. I've always found it a way of developing new areas. Professionally, I'm a linguist I'm a translator who works in engineering, telecommunications, those kind of things, highly technical work. But because of the pro bono work I've done over the years, I now can also offer and evidence expertise in civil society, human rights, women's rights, particularly in Western Africa. And I have a well-documented record of that kind of work, and I am now paid for doing that kind of work as well. So all that's well worth having, and for me it's been invaluable. Apart from anything else, the kind of text I translate in engineering and so on can tend to get, a little boring occasionally. I wouldn't like to say that to my customers, but it can get really boring. Whereas the work I do in human rights and so on is absolutely fascinating, and not only I get paid for it now, but I also find it. I know I'm doing something useful. I know that the kind of work I'm doing is being published and used in the UN and in lobby organisations and so on. So it's actually doing some good in society. So all those kind of reasons, and even if you don't get paid for pro bono work, I've had some very nice rewards for doing my pro bono work. I've been paid in house plants and flowers and bottles of wine and this kind of thing. I used to work for an organisation based in Brussels that published a bilingual newsletter, French and English, for French-speaking countries in West Africa. And that was all human rights and that kind of thing. And they didn't pay me, they couldn't afford to pay me. But when the guy who commissioned the work, whenever he visited the UK, he would call and see me, and he'd bring me a box of Belgian chocolates. And every now and again, once he also brought me half a Parmesan cheese, like a sort of huge half-moon shape, which kept us going for months. And that was really, lovely to have. Money would be good, but cheese is wonderful. So, there are some unexpected and nice rewards for doing pro bono work. So those kind of things are very good. When you're doing it, especially if you're working for charities and so on, that you are helping to build bridges. You're helping to establish communications. We know in the world today, communications, the breakdown in communications, misunderstandings and so on, are a cause of so much trouble and so much difficulty. And as professional linguists, we are the bridge builders. The work we do, it's invisible, it's often ignored, but it's vital to help establish communications between people and perhaps contribute towards a slight increase in peace and justice in the world. So for all those kind of reasons, pro bono is not just your stepping stone into paid work, it's that as well, but it's also doing something really useful. And you can feel that you've done something worthwhile. Now, finding pro bono work. I've heard from Stella in the break that one of the things, it can be quite difficult to find pro bono work. And it can. You have to go out and look for it. It's not going to come and find you. A good CV helps, as it would with any job. If you can show your work experience, your interests, your contacts and so on your CV, then that can promote you in a good light to possible work providers. And of course your languages and so on, all the other things that you need to put in. But once you've expressed your willingness to work for nothing, it's actually, people are quite keen for that, especially these days. Most of the major aid organisations and NGOs have databases of translators that they call on. I've got one or two specific ideas I'll give you, but you can do a web search and you'll find most of them have in their volunteering section on websites an area where they're asking for people to do translation and interpreting. The other thing you can do is you can look at your own immediate environment. For instance, locally, where you live, where you come from, there may be a twinning organisation. In fact, there may well be several, because a lot of towns are now twinned with 3 or 4 different countries. And you might find that you can offer your services to your local twinning organisation and helping to set up contacts, facilitating shared visits, that kind of thing. And that's all very useful. That works. It can be a nice way of doing it, and you're doing it on your doorstep. The other thing is sports clubs. Uniformed organisations, guides and scouts and things like that, children's groups. people are often very keen to have sensible adults, if they're taking a party of children abroad, for instance, or receiving, visiting children from abroad, to have some sensible adults who are also able to communicate and converse and help people out when they're in trouble and things like that. Those can be very useful. And if you volunteer your services to go with a group of children somewhere, you might find you get your fare paid, because often the adults who go with the party go there for free. Remember, you would need to have a enhanced CRB check for that if you were doing that. Your own interests. A hobby you've got or a leisure activity, again, you might find you can offer your services to the local tennis club or a music group or whatever, again, from international visits or contacts with similar groups abroad, those kind of things. And then you're using an area that you know about, your sport, for instance, or your musical instrument or whatever it is. You're using that knowledge you've got, your own specialist knowledge that you already have, plus your language. So those kind of things can be useful. And that's also a good field for networking and making contacts as well. There are some pitfalls. Sometimes the organisation you're working for has absolutely no idea how to work with a linguist. So you need to be on the ball yourself and know what's necessary. You might need, for instance, to keep an eye out for obvious blunders in a written text. If a text is aimed at a country and you see something in it that which really, wouldn't really go down well in that country, some kind of religious reference or something like that, then you can point it out. It's also worth thinking about the kind of people you want to be in receipt of your goodwill. There are one or two charities which are, can be slightly, that maybe they're spending too much money on their admin and that kind of thing and not giving enough of it to the good cause, whatever it might be. You can check that out on the Charities Commission website and just make sure that the people you're working for are the kind of people you want to work for and that their aims and values chime in with your own, especially if you have a particular kind of ethical view about things like that. And so I think working pro bono omnium, for the good of all, it does you good and it does the people you're working for good. It's a win-win situation. So I recommend it. I have got one or two ideas, only one or two. I mean, it's difficult to keep these up to date. There is an organisation called Translators Without Borders, Traducteurs Sans Frontières, which does a lot of work with Médecins Sans Frontières as well. And they have a website. It's TSF and then a dash TWB, so it's the French and English abbreviation .org. And they have a requests for translators and interpreters a lot of the time. ProZ, whatever you call it, they have a section on pro bono translating and volunteering. There's an organisation called Prisoners Abroad, which is prisonersabroad.org.uk, which is communicating with people in prison abroad and helping families out when they're trying to support people in prison abroad. There's an organisation called IC Volunteers, which is letter IC, volunteers, all one word, .org. And they're an international non-profit organisation specialising in the field of communications, particularly languages with communications technologies. And they look for volunteers sometimes. And then, of course, there's 2012. If you're based in London, the volunteering programme for 2012 opens next year, 2010. So you can register your interest as soon as the website opens. It's worth keeping an eye on that. That's on the London 2012 website, obviously. So you may find an opening there, but keep looking and keep offering your services and speak to people, talk to people you know, locally, back home where you come from, whatever. Talk to people you know, and you'd be surprised. You can often be welcomed with open arms if you say, "Yeah, I'll work for nothing." So, right, that's it. I think you can ask your questions of the panel now. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Joanna. It was very, very interesting. I didn't want to give a completely negative impression about pro bono work. I have been approached on quite a number of occasions for pro bono interpreting work in particular, which I've passed on to students for conferences, particularly in the developing world and so on and so forth. So there are opportunities out there, certainly. Right, I'd like to open up the floor now to questions to any of the speakers that we've had today on any of the issues that they've raised, or any issues indeed that you wish to raise. There are a couple of mics, one on either side. Is there one on the other side too? Yes, one on either side. So if you just make yourselves known, and if you have anyone in particular that you want to address a question to, then please say the name of the person. I think we're going to start off down here.
Catherine Rushton. A question to anyone who wants to answer it, really. Proofreading has been mentioned briefly today, and that's an area I'd just like to know a bit more about, because anecdotally, I've heard it can very often turn into retranslation, and therefore you can end up earning very little from it. Also, just starting to go into a translation career, I'm wondering if I should avoid proofreading until I'm more experienced. You know, is that really something that should be done by a more experienced translator?
I think it's very important when you are talking to a client or an agency to define with them what they mean by proofreading. Proofreading really should be about checking a text in one language. It is not about checking a translation, which is more probably called revision or editing, and it is a very different job. Inevitably, it should be reasonably quick to check an English text, say, if that's your target language. It's a very, very different job to checking a translation, so you need to clarify, and the term does get misused. I've very often been given something that is a proofreading job, and it isn't. So just define what it is they mean by that.
Okay. Any more questions?
Hi, this is Joanna, please. I'm a first year...
Can we get a microphone here, please? Oh, you've got it. Yeah, well, we can't hear you. Can't hear you very well.
Sorry. I'm a first year French language student, and I've been trying to find French charities in London that I can just... I'm already a volunteer for a local charity, but just to find French charities in London that I can help out with. And I'm really struggling. I've been researching it for about 7 months. I live sort of practically like in the French Quarter of London as well. And I can't find it.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by... You mean charities that want you to use French?
Just to be in a French environment so that I can listen to
Oh, I see.
with and to help out.
Well, have you... I don't know, really. Have you tried the Institut Français?
Yes.
Yeah. I can't sort of... If you're thinking about if you think about wanting to be able to speak French, I mean, one of the things you could do is find a French circle. There are a lot of French circle groups, local kind of, people meeting together to speak French, where you might be in, if your French is extremely good, you might be in more of a teaching role yourself, or even volunteering with the French nursery kind of environment where, again, the Institut Français should be able to give you that, or the French Embassy. They might know where local French nursery groups are. There's quite a few, I can't remember the name, but there's an organisation that has, to teach little English children French, or for children in bilingual families to be able to maintain their French. So that's one option if you like working with children. But otherwise, I don't know that you'd find an actual French charity based in London to work for, because they're more likely to be across. The other thing you could do is go to Calais from time to time and work with the sans-papiers or something, but I don't know. Okay.